Happy Ending. Years Alone, Then Not. By Bakurakrazie. Chapter 2. Hardly Even Yearning at This Night. Of course, while he was still protective around the full moon, it didn't mean he was always as intense when it wasn't the night of. Some of the nights surrounding it, while he still needed to watch over them, there was a little more leeway for fooling around and enjoying each other's company. Oftentimes, Patton and Roman would give him pets, scratches, and nuzzle him back as Virgil nuzzled their faces. Logan would scoff, rolling his eyes at the overt displays of affection, but when he believed the other two, and Virgil, were asleep, he'd stroke Virgil, looking at him with something close to reverence. Tonight they'd been in the same arrangement. Virgil had taken to giving an extra lap around the perimeter, moon closer to full than it had been the previous night. All this was fairly normal, which is why he was completely blindsided when he returned. He entered the house through the slightly ajar door which they left open for him, and he heard the distressing sounds of an argument coming from the bedroom. "Don't see why!" Roman was yelling. "You said the same thing last time!" "That is because the facts on it haven't changed, Roman, so my argument has remained the same. Loath though you may be to admit it." "Oh, please, do you even know if it's relevant? It's not like werewolves have been greatly studied." Virgil's stomach turned. This was about him? Oh, no, this was his fault. He caused this. They were arguing about him. He swallowed and started to slowly trudge through the cabin, ears folded back and tail down. "And that is exactly why my point stands, unless you're implying that I am fabricating statements out of my own desires and claiming them as truth." What were they upset about? Were they upset at him? Was it something that he did? "Oh, no, Logan, I'd never imply something like that. I'm outright saying it." It was at this moment that Virgil entered the bedroom, Logan with his arms crossed, Roman pointing at him, both of them glaring at the other. Were they having second thoughts about everything? He whimpered. Immediately all heads turned towards him. Patton, who oddly seemed to have been watching them go back and forth with nothing more than fond exasperation, clasped his hands together in what Virgil recognized as a suppressed squeal. Logan and Roman both unfolded and relaxed into something that looked almost normal. "Ah." Logan adjusted his glasses. "Virgil, you've returned. Roman and I shall continue our discussion as we lock the doors." He gave him a nod as he and Roman left to do just that. Roman gave him a warm smile, reaching out to give him a pat on the head with a little ruffle to his fur before he headed out after Logan. The sounds of heated, whispered discussion carried throughout the house. Virgil turned towards Patton, who smiled at him. "Don't worry," he assured as he made grabby hands toward Virgil, who immediately went to him. "They were just fighting over who got to sleep by your head." Patton made a soft cooing noise as Virgil started leaning into him, petting him all around his face, and he relaxed a little bit. "You know," Patton whispered conspiratorially, "Logan said it's because Roman moves in his sleep too much, and that dogs sleep better on someone more stable." Virgil considered this, and that did feasibly sound like that could have been the argument based on what he heard. "But I think he just likes rubbing your nose." He scratched behind his now perked-up ears as he said it. Virgil gave a soft noise in agreement as he nodded, and Patton laughed. He heard the other two returning, and Patton stood up, waiting for him to follow as he headed toward the bed. Virgil broke into a slow trot as he realized his plan, and they managed to get situated, with Virgil laying his head on top of Patton, just as Logan and Roman stepped in. "Hey!" Roman spluttered. "This was supposed to be my night by his head." Logan merely strode past him, sighing as he rid himself of shoes and socks. "Sorry, Ro. We'll have a schedule set up after tonight. For now, just come on up here and let's get to bed." He patted the space beside him. Roman huffed, crossing his arms as he turned around. Virgil whined. Patton resumed his affection as he tried a different tactic. "Oh, no!" He put on a fake distress tone that nonetheless made Virgil tense up and look around for danger. "I'm being held captive by a vicious werewolf." Virgil calmed slightly and gave an amused snort beside himself. "Whatever shall I do? How shall I ever escape from his fearsome clutches?" He looked expectantly at Roman. He lasted about 3 seconds before he caved. "Fear not!" He pointed toward the sky, turning around in one smooth movement. "I shall rescue you from the fearsome beast." Virgil turned his head to meet Roman's eyes. "Grr," he blandly contributed. He couldn't help the way his tail thumped against the bed happily. Roman gasped, puffing himself up and looking pretty brave for someone wearing soft pajamas. "Fiend! How dare you take such a handsome prince hostage!" Logan swept past him, evidently finished getting ready, and shimmied his way into the bed, getting underneath Virgil's weight. Virgil stood on all fours to give him some room to adjust, which he did quickly. "Patton, my glasses, if you will." He plucked them off of his face and held them out to him to put on the bedside stand. Patton took off his own glasses and put them both folded up on the side. Virgil got up and turned around to face Roman. "Foul beast! You've taken a second handsome prince for your hoard, and you've blinded them!" Roman stomped over to the bed. "Where shall your reign of terror end?" "If he's a werewolf, why are you attributing qualities of a dragon to him?" Logan rolled his eyes again, but he couldn't quite hide the smile on his face. Virgil's tail was wagging heavily. "Fear not, handsome, brave princes! This handsome, brave prince/knight is here to save you from your captor!" He leapt forward toward the bed to grab a pillow, holding it in his hands threateningly above Virgil. And that is when Virgil launched his attack. He gave Roman a big, long, wet lick from his chin up, before ending it with a firm press of his nose onto Roman's forehead. Virgil, Patton, and Logan were then given the pleasure of watching Roman turn an attractive shade of red, which quite matched the striping on his pajamas. He dropped his pillow. Virgil was grinning the best he could in this form. Patton giggled as Roman began stammering over nothing in particular. "I think he defeated you." Patton grinned. Roman puffed himself up again, frowning with his finger up in the air, ready to argue. Virgil let his tongue loll out slightly. If he were in his human form, he'd be sticking his tongue out. "I concede," Roman admitted, looking down. "I suppose I have no other choice but to be taken hostage too." He trudged over the few steps to the bed, torso hanging forward in exaggerated defeat, feet dragging along the wooden floor as he rolled into bed. "But—" He let his head rise back up, smirking up at Virgil. "Don't you believe for 1 second that I'll go easy on you tomorrow," he began, voice low with the promise of retaliation. Virgil's heart rate increased with what he would later insist was anticipation, as opposed to Roman's voice coupled with the gaze in his eyes. "I'll study your tactics, your weaknesses, and I'll come at you harder tomorrow. And he raised his hand, he placed it on top of Virgil's head, win." He circled his hand around from where it was, down and around to his muzzle. Fortunately, his wholly embarrassing reaction was interrupted by Logan clearing his throat, wearing a highly amused expression. "That being settled, perhaps we can go to sleep?" He raised an eyebrow at the two of them. Unfortunately, the line of sight they had when looking at him gave a great view of Patton getting assaulted by a heavily wagging tail. He seemed not to mind it, at least. Roman graciously said nothing about it as he finally clambered into bed, smug grin on his face as he bounced on the mattress, settling in. Virgil quickly turned around and plopped back down, shielding the three of them. Patton idly wiped the fur from his face, spitting out a few hairs from his mouth. Once he'd managed to calm his tail down enough that he wasn't hitting Roman, he laid his head down on Patton's chest. He felt the other settle. Patton gave a contented sigh as he snuggled in deeper. Everything was as it should be. Except— "My pillow's on the floor!" Roman complained. "I dropped it when Virgil retaliated." "Don't you mean retaliated?" "And I didn't pick it back up when I got into bed," Roman finished, not even reacting to Patton's interruption. "So just pick it back up," Logan huffed. "Surely you can reach the floor if you angle your body correctly." There was a semi-long pause, after which Roman mumbled to himself so quietly that even Virgil's hearing couldn't pick it up. "Care to repeat that?" "I'm warm, and I'm comfy, and I don't want to move," he spoke softly, barely loud enough for Patton to hear, and Virgil heard him shift the blankets over his face. Logan sighed and grabbed the pillow between himself and Patton. "You may use this one, as Virgil won't be using it tonight." "Ah, thank you, I'll—" Thwap! And then the rest of what he said was muffled into the soft fluff of a pillow. Logan turned over, smile almost audible in his voice as he bade Roman pleasant dreams. Roman arranged the pillow under his head. "Nothing but a gentle night to you, Patton. Sleep well, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Logan, you're dead to me." Patton tried to hide a giggle. "But good night, fair fusspot." "To you as well, Roman." "Good night, Patton, Virgil." In his tired state, he let his arm drift forward, leaning against Virgil's jaw, a slight pressure. "Good night, Lo." Patton patted Logan's shoulder. "Good night, Ro. I'm sure you'll defeat Virgil tomorrow." He ruffled Roman's hair as best as he could from the angle. "Good night, Virgil. Thanks for—" He stroked his thumb over the top of his head. "Keeping us safe and warm." Virgil nuzzled his nose over his forehead in response until he slipped back completely under the covers. Virgil, for his part, couldn't respond to their well wishes in kind, due to his current lack of human vocal cords, but he settled onto them that little bit more, hoping that would be enough to convey his meaning. As he felt their bodies through the quilts and his fur, he fell into an easy sleep. This is the end of Happy Ending, Years Alone, Then Not, by Bakurakrazie, based off of Delimeful's How Easy You Are to Need. The link to the fic will be in the description, as well as a link to mine and the author's Tumblr. Thanks for listening!